Thanks for listening. Before the episode gets started, I wanted to leave you a quick message. One, in episodes 2, 3, and 4, we realized that there was a couple of audio issues with our recording mic and our setup and all of that stuff. We launched this podcast without buying a lot of gear and without knowing 1,000,000% what we were doing in terms of how to handle audio files and all of that stuff. And so the second, third, and fourth episode all have some issues with them where a guest maybe sounds really quiet or someone pounds on the table and it hits the mic stand or something like that. So those things happen in those episodes. If you're the type of person who gets really bothered by that stuff, then I would suggest you start at episode 1 that is just Allie and myself, or you could skip ahead to episode 5 with our friend Simi, and that audio is much more clear and we don't have all of those issues. So thanks for bearing with us and learning. We've had great feedback on episodes 2, 3, and 4, so those are great. Our guests share great stuff, great stories. We have a great time with them, but if audio bothers you a lot, go to episodes 1 or 5. Peace. Thank you.
So today's podcast is with Chris McAlister. Adam, how do you know Chris?
I met Chris because I started a Twitter fight because I was complaining about businesses in suburbs using the name Columbus when they were actually in the suburbs. So they would say Columbus and things and blah, 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 but they weren't really Columbus. I also hated my job and was just an angry Twitter person back then. And so he reached out to me and was like, dude, let's get coffee.
Dude, you're pretty angry.
Dude, yeah. And then he was like, how's your life? And then I think I started crying. And so... That's an amazing, and that's where it started.
Friend.
Yeah. And then, do you remember that one time we were had that really big fight in the car on the way back from Michigan?
Yes.
So that time was the next time I talked to Chris.
And you went and got some
And
coaching.
that's where I was like, Chris, I'm pretty suck at my marriage right now. And then he was like, I got you. And I don't know why. I just trusted him a lot.
That's cool.
There was no reason. He wasn't like a marriage person, expert or whatever.
Or like a counselor.
But I was just like, I don't know. I think I should talk to him because we were fighting. I remember that, and so I emailed him at 3 a.m. because I did, and he talked to me. And it was the most helpful thing. And I thought, and little did I know, I thought he was going to tell me a bunch of things about marriage, like how to be a better husband and blah blah blah, and don't say always and never, and don't all this stuff. And he instead he just talked about me, and he talked about my fears, and he talked about what I really wanted in the world, and he talked about all of these places that just about taking care of myself, which was really cool. And then I didn't realize this, but I was kind of patient number 1 as far as his coaching program and what he does now.
Yeah.
It's developed, it's massively different. This was 7 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kind of just walked me through a lot of that stuff and helped me kind of figure out what was important to me, how I was wired.
And then 5 years later, I went through his 12-week coaching.
Yeah.
What would you call it? Coaching program.
Yeah.
And it helped me immensely with leadership. So mine was focused a lot on, with Chris, everything goes back to who you are, but mine was very tied to who I am, what are my fears, how am I wired, but then how does that translate to leading on our team?
Yeah. And so Chris, all of us, the 3 of us have all collaborated on a bunch of things. You did covers for his past books.
Yep.
I've worked with him on a ton of things. He's worked with us on a ton of stuff. He's come and done workshops here at the Wonder Jam.
He's done team coaching sessions with us.
For us, yeah.
So it's been cool. Today we're going to talk to him a lot about, just kind of pivoting within your industry, not just changing a career path, but really how can I change the focus of who my audience is, and how can I change how I talk about things?
Yeah. And so part of my, if you've, Chris talks a lot about his kind of build up because he had been doing, he was doing that stuff with me like 6 years ago before he was doing it full time.
Yeah.
Or 5 years before he was doing it full time. And then, what was the lead up to jumping out of it? Because he's always been doing it. And so, I'm excited to share some of his stories. I think a lot of people will resonate with his story because it had been rattling around in his head for a long time. It had been building for a long time. And what he does now is such a culmination of all of that stuff.
Into what
into what he's doing now and what stuff he's working on to kind of launch into the future. So a lot of exciting stuff going on in his world. It's been fun to watch his business grow over the last 2 years. A lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, so give it up for Chris McAlister.
Give it up.
I love saying that.
Yeah, give it up.
I like saying
standing ovation, please.
I like saying give it up or like shout out to blah blah blah.
What does that literally mean? If
give
you're
it
like
up?
Give it up for.
It sounds a little promiscuous.
I know, right? Yeah, like you're not supposed to give it up on the first date.
Let alone the first.
But we're
podcast.
sitting here asking people to
You can do whatever you want. It's your body.
give it up on the first podcast to Chris McAlister.
And on that note, keep on listening.
So everyone we're talking to in the first 12 episodes is all people who have been in business full time for 2 years or longer, and we have found as we work with people that there's a ton of learning in the first 2 years that you can't anticipate. You couldn't look into the future and predict what you as a business owner are going to run into. You can anticipate your business and sort of guess ahead for some of that, but as far as the obstacles that you'll overcome, the things that you didn't see coming, that all happens. Seems like a lot of that happens in the first 2 years. And so we want to talk specifically about you and SightShift in the first 2 years. So just to get started, explain a little bit about what SightShift is now and what it's doing and what it's got going on, and then we'll kind of go back to the beginning of it.
Yeah, cool. Well, just awesome for me to be with you guys and jumping in. I thought you guys had a bunch of episodes because Mindy Kaling had told me what to expect when she on the show.
She was great. She's a friend of the podcast.
She said to expect gotcha journalism.
She's so funny.
For that. No, for me, what I love is that I get to help leaders really relax with who they are. So oftentimes that's like CEOs and owners that are building a culture intentionally around their business with clients and friends, people they serve, but how to build it in a way that is true to who they are so that they're not on this hamster wheel of building what ends up becoming a prison sentence for a lot of business owners and CEOs where they're chained to this endless demand that they put on themselves. Or they build something that's not authentic to who they are. They don't enjoy it. So how can we help them in the midst of it? Because you can't shut it down and go on a 6-month sabbatical. How can they, in the midst of it, reorganize the way that they're approaching it? And it's a deep dive. We start off simple if they're ready to start off simple, or we start off deep if they're ready to start off deep.
So you were doing this stuff for a long time, part-time, for years.
Yeah. Well, 2009... I'd experienced the swings of loss and success. So a year and a half before that, I'm sitting on the deck of a custom-built home that I could send my kids to college from and wrap around deck, around a tree, around to the master bedroom, 5-zone surround sound system, like every detail, like remote controlled blinds for the up high windows you can't reach.
Always wanted those.
So cool. it just feels good. But what I wasn't prepared for, all the hard work, achieving a lot of wealth through getting this going and sitting on the deck of our house going, this is all the feeling I get from this. Like, this doesn't feel that awesome. It feels good to accomplish this, but it's not enough. Fast forward like a year and a half later, real estate crisis hits. We were on the hook for over 6 figures of debt. And I couldn't buy a box of Cheerios, legitimate true story, facing an eviction notice. And I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Like, if we get kicked out of this house, I can't buy groceries, who am I? And really started to wrestle with some deep questions that couldn't break through when it was super successful. it took the pain to do that. And so at that point, I just got obsessive about like, I got to figure out how to know who I am apart from what's happening. And when I separated those concepts in my mind, I knew that there was something big for me.
Yeah.
And I just started studying it. And as I was studying, just started helping people. And so spent about 4.5, 5 years actively like putting things together and teaching people what I was learning. So part of that was getting a couple of books out, doing events. We used to do the Hocking Hills retreats, and go away and hang out with people for a few days and teach this stuff. But it was all still part-time.
Yeah. And then when did I just saw I saw a thing on Facebook that was like 4 years ago this morning or yesterday morning that was one of those morning leadership things you did at Discovery. There was like that series of 4 mornings once a week. We did all the recordings. You recorded everything from.
Yeah.
It was wild. It seemed like so long ago.
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. And it wasn't until getting into it full time that I was able to actually get a feel for what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
What was as you were doing it part time? What was hard, or what was? I mean, I know a lot of your story, so I'm asking questions because I'm leading you. Talk about how you had to be patient, because you were ambitious and excited to go fast and scale huge, probably a lot earlier than you were able to jump into it full time, right?
Yeah.
So like, how did you have to wrestle with the patience in that time? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, everybody's wired up different. So some are on the extreme of they don't believe enough, right, in what they can do. There's almost a little bit of where they're hiding their gift and hiding. And then there are some that show up too soon. And it's like, man, I need to show everybody what I got. And everybody has a tendency towards one of those in their work, and they have a tendency towards that in their relationships, and sometimes they're the same. Mine is a tendency to show up too fast, too early. Like, oh, look at this thing, Eureka. I remember when I first like put together just a way of explaining my thinking on this, and this is very rudimentary. And I'd spent like months working on a dissertation, hanging out at a cafe, putting it all together, and I come home and I've got it on one page and I show it to my wife and I'm like, Brandy, you know when scientists say Eureka? Eureka. And she looks at it and she goes, I don't get it. I was like, I've got so much more work to do.
Yeah.
So the patience for me was really continuing to hone how I could explain what was unlocking in me, and then how I could explain it, not only what was unlocking in me and what was happening in me, but in a way that other people could take that journey if they wanted to. So I mean, I had to feel pretty early that not everybody's like me, but a lot of people could be helped by this.
Yeah.
So how can I language in a way that they do? I mean, I tried like you're in the water and there's 3 sharks going around you, and here are the sharks, and all kinds of stuff now that I look back on, and it seems ludicrous.
Yeah.
But it was all part of the process.
Yeah.
For those that are listening, I can't help but, you know, I'm in awe of the Wonder Gym bathroom.
Our bathroom is cool.
It's the best bathroom in the world. I just did an Instagram story for like 20 seconds back there.
That's awesome.
I was like, I'm in the best bathroom in the world because I have seen what's happened with you guys and what you're doing. And I think it's important for people listening to know this, that that's a symbol of your journey, right? Because you move in, you commit to this studio space. It's so beautiful and awesome. But early on, it's like, we just got to get in there.
Yeah.
And then the bathroom's just there and functioning. And I can remember coming here for different events and walking in the bathroom and saying, like, the next iteration, the next change. And it's a picture, too, of, I know that a lot of that was trusting and empowering your team to do that, right? And that's an extension of who you are. And in a weird way, but fun to me now, that's the same. Yeah. It's you're continuing to make it better and improve it.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know, to the point that you get a Beyonce picture up there. And
then you're good.
Then you're cool.
Yeah.
You're awesome.
Then it's perfect.
That's all you need. Did you have to be, Allie, you had to be patient as you were getting started.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? Because yours was, you're not prone to probably run as quickly ahead of yourself as Chris is.
Right.
So what did that look like for you? Because you had part-time jobs, other jobs that sucked, call center. And you had to be patient. But you're all the time you were like doing this freelance art design stuff.
Yeah, I think for me it never feels different the next day. For me it feels like I still have the same amount of things to do. The things change and I wear different hats, but I know how much things have changed over the past 8 years. But I day to day never feel like, oh, well, now I'm here. You never feel like the bathroom is done. You're still like, wow, I'd really love to make this even better. While keeping the pictures of Beyonce, obviously.
Yeah.
But I am such a task doer that day in and day out, you talking, Adam, about how I used to work at a call center out of college because of the recession, or I worked for the state government. And then I freelanced and now I'm here. I don't feel like day to day my life has changed that much, which is funny. A lot of people would probably hear that and laugh, or you would say that's not true. But I think when you're not big dreaming, when you don't have a eureka moment, you have like many days in a row of just doing the work. I struggle with I struggle with dreaming, or to say like, this is what it's going to be in 10 years. I just turned 30 yesterday. I don't even feel like doing a 10-year or 5-year plan is so like, oh my gosh, that's when I'm 35 and 40. Makes me just be like, I'm just going to put my head down and do the work, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, you know? So, I mean, Adam, and you and I both feel like we balance each other out in that way. And I like look to you, Chris, as someone where I'm like, oh my, I want to be more like that. Because sometimes it doesn't feel that way to me. Like, I'm amazed at people who like think big.
It's wild. So how long for both of you were you part-time before full-time? How long were you working on stuff before you like full-time doing my own thing for myself? Like the thing that I've been working on in the side.
Like 3 years for me.
Yeah, for me it was 4.5, 5 years.
Yeah.
And you know what you were saying about like what, you know, you were doing the work every day. That's showing up. And I think there's two extremes that keep people from showing up. There's the courage to do the work every day, and they need to hear the word go. Just like ship, make, go, go. And then there's people like me that are like, hey, look at this big thing that we can go do, the moon shots, right?
Right.
And I can be so distracted with planning that then I'm not doing the work every day.
Right.
And for me, like the real love is doing the work every day.
Right.
That's the craftsman part of it, the making part of it. And so, you know, where I need to hear the patience, keep making it every day, but let it build and grow.
Like having both of it, doing both of it.
Yeah. I'm going to have the dream. I don't have to work at that, but I need to have the patience to just go and let myself get lost in doing the work every day. And then for like what you're saying, you were showing up, you're doing the work every day. You weren't letting the lack of the dream hold you back. And, you know, the 5 and 10 year plans are more obsolete than ever. I think the most you can do is have like an off, you know, like this is the big idea.
Right. The ultimate goal.
And I'm going to break it down. And you're really reacting in quarters, you know, quarter by quarter, paying attention. So you've seen the same true for you?
Well, I think in the work that we do, and Chris, I know your story, but we can talk a little bit more about it on this podcast. But you do shift with the times, you shift with your customers' feedback, you shift with really wanting someone on your team, you shift with, I'm interested in this now and I want to do that. It would be one thing if I was a woodworker, and I'm sure a woodworker will listen to this and be like, actually, that's not true. But I just talked to someone today earlier, and we might work with them, and she was like, how did you get started in design and photography? And I remembered my journey through those types of creating, but that shifts what we offer, which shifts our quarterly goals, which ends up shifting the big goal, you know? And so I have such a hard time locking myself into something. I always joke, but Adam is like the only thing that I've ever committed to longer than like, you know, a couple years.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So far.
Thank you.
So far. That is wiring, and it's knowing that wiring. And so opposites attract. So of course, you know, with my wife and I can be long range. She's like in the moment. First piece of furniture we ever bought, money from, you know, our wedding, we're buying an entertainment center, and she's like, I just don't know which one to pick. So then I impose upon her my decision-making grid.
Right.
And I just said, well, just pick one you know you can love for life. And she's like, well, that's
What?
none of them. And it is that filter that you're either pie in the sky or you're so not believing in what is happening in you that either of those distract you from the work. And I mean, and if you're around good people, they're going to balance that out. I can think of times when Adam has brought me to earth over and over by saying, look, don't hide in the cave and go create something that you just know is going to be awesome. And there are times to do that, but especially going into it full time, he was like, just be with people, pay attention to the terrain. And it's that pulling you back down. Yeah. But what you were saying about doing things that are just showing up and doing the work, I was thinking about, like, I don't like stuff very long when I make it, because like 6 months later, I'm like, I could have said that this much better. I could have done, but like I still look at the book covers and love them because timeless, not trendy. And so I think it's just like knowing your wiring. If you're going to go into your thing full time, what's going to get in the way of you showing up and doing what you need to do?
Yeah, that's huge.
That's the truth.
How do you, Adam? How do you feel like? You...
Well, I'm like future dreamer. I probably have in our life. Like if I wasn't working with Allie, I would be broke for sure.
A professional dreamer.
I'd be a professional dreamer, right? I'd be working at some company because I wouldn't do the work that like pays bills. But it's being selfish in the short term of being like, what do I want to do today? Like what work would I enjoy doing today? And sometimes that's writing, and sometimes it's coaching, and sometimes it's things like that. But it's saying, this is what I want to show up and do. And then I get really connected to other people. I'm like very much extrovert. And so it's very much if there's somebody else on the other end of a deadline or a paycheck or a payment or invoice or something like that, I tend to pull through. And if it's more obscure, I tend to drop it off and not get it done. So I think it's just knowing like what balances you out.
Right.
I found that for me, that's helpful. When you got started, what were the first things you noticed as you kind of moved around into, okay, full time, I can finally commit all of my time to working on the thing I want to work on? What did you notice? What was different? What became a lot easier than before? What became a lot more difficult than before? What was that like?
Well, for me, it was your business is stupid and doesn't work. I mean, and I am, I have a big dream for SightShift, but what I saw for like what the center point of that dream was about was just wrong, and it was off. I think the first 3 months of being full-time with SightShift were, by far, all 3 months combined would be the lowest single month of business for SightShift ever. Nothing happened because I was chipping away in the wrong market. And it was paying attention to that. I mean, I can remember sitting at my kitchen table just like emailing, making calls and like reaching out and even a little bit too much trying to make it happen. Because there's a finesse there. Like if you're doing something you love from a quality standpoint, the way I look at it is you want to play the long game every day, but you got to pay bills. And so, for me, single income provider, 3 kids, and it's like, I got to make a chunk of change every month. Well, I'm going to play 51% long game every day, 49% short game, right? So if I'm stuck at a crossroads, I'm going to tip there. I'm not going to pressure sales too hard, those kind of things. But the first few months, man, it's like nothing. Yeah. And I still remember this, like December was scary. It was Christmas time. And I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? I mean, there is no parachute. Yeah. I don't know how to buy groceries in 2 weeks, or at least had a little bit of a runway. And I remember waking up, and this sounds like super woo-woo and mystical, but for me it was huge. It's like you're not going to know these actions till you're committed onto the path. Yeah. And I remember waking up one morning and it just hit me, and it was like, Chris, you're in the wrong space. You should be you should be focusing everything you're doing on leadership and business.
Versus what?
Versus, well, what I was trying to do in the nonprofit world.
Got it.
So some of that was my background, stuff with churches and other spaces like that. And I remember waking up and that hit me. And I remember telling my wife about it. She was like, yeah, I could have told you that. I was like, well, why didn't
She's over there journaling. He's doing the wrong thing.
This is so obvious to her. And the first month, I mean, it was January, we made money.
Yeah.
You know? And
was that market waiting for you there? Like, did you feel like you were already having those conversations? Because I could see someone listening to this and thinking that eureka moment in a different, not your first eureka moment, but that moment could happen. But is there anyone there? Do I need to just start over? Is this going to take twice as long to get into this new? Like, how are you balancing those two audiences so that you could tap into that?
A lot of people, we work with people who are terrified of shifting a market or being like, oh, I used to sell coffee mugs for $10 and now I'm going to sell them for $50, or this used to be like a local regional thing, and I could I think even within Columbus people were like, oh, I was in the short north and then I'm going to go out to Dublin, and how does that work? Does it that stuff scares people, moving for different people, different audiences.
It comes down, I mean, this is going to, again, for me, it comes down to a place that I think we BS and trick ourselves so much. Like, I should do business this way. I should do business in this marketplace. I should. And as much as I felt really like cleansed of a lot of that, I didn't know I had some more in me. And I still do. I mean, we all in a process of evolution. But it was me going into an environment and going, whoa. I just spoke to this company. I did some stuff for them. Like, that's the little kid in Chris jumping up and down. He just got to build a fort in the woods.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all I've been doing.
Yeah.
For the I was able all of a sudden in one instance to go, everything I've done up to this point counts. I can draw on all of it.
Got it. So it wasn't just this starting over point.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And there's a hidden part to the narrative that would be unfair to not share. For 5 years doing it on the side, helping people like crazy, there was something ready to be activated.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't something that, it had already been started.
Right.
You didn't wake up one day and say, I want to be a health coach with no background of, totally. There was a lot.
Yeah. I've been doing leadership, coaching, and working with people in some form, even if we didn't call it that, for 15, 17 years. Right? Yeah. But for 5 years, actively under the umbrella of SightShift.
Got it.
So, there was a much, much more infrastructure there.
What was it? So when you're deciding, because I remember paying attention and watching this, but it was actively saying, these are the types of people I'm going to try and work with, and then now there's a new type of person or a new type of client that I'm going to work with and is going to hire me. Even though you were kind of offering the same menu, you just had to change how you talked about it. Yeah. How much of that was easy? How much of that was difficult? Did people, because doing so much in the nonprofit space beforehand, you talked about things in a certain way. And then in the for-profit spaces, people talk about things in a different way. Did people care about the whole past? Did people, did that come up? Did it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. My mind is flooded with so much right now because I don't talk about this ever publicly.
Right.
So it's like, it's not like, oh, I say this here, this joke here.
Yeah.
But a number of things. Okay, so one, and I remember this, is it okay if I think about our coaching alley?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So when you had jumped into the coaching alley.
Let me just preface. I did a 12-week coaching package with Chris a year and a half ago.
That sounds right, yeah.
And in it, we focused a lot on personal growth, but also leadership, styles, managing, things like that. So.
And how to paint. I taught her how to paint.
Yeah, he taught me how to be a better artist. Honestly, probably.
No, I tried to draw a little thing to ask Brandy out on a date tonight on, how you can draw something and send
on
it
text.
through texting.
Yeah.
And I tried to draw us eating. It looked horrible.
where you have to give an interpretation. Yeah.
And I was going to draw something inappropriate, and that looked like a visit to the zoo. And
She's like, I'd love to go to the zoo.
We babysat Kevin's daughter, May.
Yeah.
And May and me and Allie all got out paints here and painted.
That's awesome.
And she's 5.
That's awesome.
Mine was the worst by far.
May's actually was the best, and one of the people that works for us was like, "Are those her paintings?"
Yeah,
like,
she
no,
took
those are ours."
she took hers home, and then ours are sitting out here. It was Erica. Erica comes in, and she's like, "Oh, are those May's?" We're like, "No, Allie and I made
That's
those."
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love that.
Anyway,
so
sorry,
much.
you were saying.
We fired her.
Well, actually, I was going to say I drew this thing up for Brady with like the joking of the inappropriate picture.
Right.
And I said, I didn't send this one to you because it looked like we went to the zoo. My 14-year-old happened to be like walking by, I guess, read the text. And she was like, she just read this. And it's
That's amazing.
But no, so the idea is, I remember this was like the first time I got stared in the face with this when you jumped in and you were like, okay, so here's my concern. Because of where you were with your message, at what point, and these are my words, at what point will any of that, I'm nervous about that being forced on me.
Right.
It's kind of like an agenda.
Right.
To the purpose that there's something weighing this message down.
Right.
And I remember like feeling this was very true, but I think it was probably the first time I'd articulated it because I hadn't been asked that directly. And I just said, well, here's the thing. There's no pressure. It's all about helping you know you.
Right.
And so what happened for me was while I'm making this adjustment, I face this crossroads. I have tons of business stories to tell. And I did have a business experience to draw from. When I go into these places, do I only tell business stories? Even if I'm leaving a context of any kind of direct tie-in to my past as far as any kind of, faith message, what do I do? Do I just tell business stories? And I remember like driving to my first like closing of a bigger deal. And I thought, no, I'm going to tell the personal ones. Even though the agenda won't be in the message, I'm going to tell the personal stories and the business stories.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with this guy and he goes, hey, we heard some of your stuff online and we just want to make sure when you come in and speak that you tell those personal stories too.
Oh, good.
And I'd already decided to do that driving there. And it was like a moment of decision. And then to have that affirmed like that.
Yeah.
So to answer the question that you had asked, Adam, it's like what made it easy is awesome people.
Right.
I mean, from the beginning, I was able to like step out of a world that's hard to step out of, that you get really like labeled with.
Yeah.
And I just distanced myself hardcore from it and didn't refer to it and didn't tell stories from it and would just tell stories like, hey, one time I was leading in an organization, right?
Yeah.
Because 90% of my work was relocating, buying buildings, capital campaigns, staffing, hiring, firing. It was all that world more than it was, some of the traditional concepts of like clergy life.
Yeah.
But it took me 2 years to get the courage to actually have anything online bio-wise, which I do now, that at least nods in that direction. Right. I did have, along the way, some people that would find out and would express concern. Most would find out and not care. But like I remember one person like reached out after he had started, found some stuff online, and was like, look, man, I don't know if I want to do this with you. And so I just hopped on the phone with him. And this is key. I wasn't playing the short game. Insecure, trying to make sure. I'm like, hey, man, whatever you need to do, playing the long game. Right. But I said, here's where I'm at. I'm going to be very open with you. My goal is just to help people know who they are. Yeah. And my experience allows me to meet a lot of different cultures. Right now, since then, I've worked with people that are most, not religious, and that's not a part of the conversation. But when they are, whether it's Eastern, Western, some hybrid in between, the beauty of it now is that can happen. But it did scare me. Yeah. I mean, I was nervous of that. Yeah. Because I didn't want to be. It's hard when you're afraid of being labeled into a certain category that you don't want to stay in. And if I would have moved out of fear, I would have either A, not put myself out there, or B, tried to too aggressively put myself out there as something I'm not.
Yeah. Right. I remember for both of us, I moved here in 2008. I was a youth pastor. And I remember, like, every time we talk about and tell our story, that's the part of the story where I'm like, I don't, because people always have reaction to that one way or another. some people are like, oh, and then they like that part of the story, and that's the part they want to talk about. But that's not what I do anymore, and it's not the part of the story I want to talk about. And then other people just think it's weird and don't want to talk to me because that's there.
Yeah.
It took a while to like be okay sharing that part of the story. And I remember when you were part-time at the Department of Natural Resources for the state of Ohio, you were there like 30 hours a week. That was like the main part of your income at the time when you started there. But you told nobody you worked there. Everybody knew you were like a freelance designer full-time. That's how people perceived it.
And I think perception is different depending on what you're trying to communicate. Yeah. So I remember talking to you about that and thinking, do I want to do a 12-week program? Will it have, different faith or religious elements in it? Because I was looking for something a little bit more business. But I would always value that honesty, whereas I know I'm always thinking of maybe who might be listening in the future, obviously. But thinking through, there are times where I think you can downplay something in your story to get your brand communicated correctly. I think there are people who they almost feel like they're being dishonest by saying, well, I still have a day job, but I'm really trying to pursue this food side business, like in the food industry.
Yeah.
I
see so many people when I do coaching with me, so many people who have respectable businesses or think highly of another business they just follow along on Instagram or whatever, and don't understand the reality of what it's like for a business owner on the other side of Instagram, of understanding that you were like, as people thought you've been doing freelance design for 5 years full time, that didn't pay the bills. And so while that was the number one thing you cared about, that was the thing you put the most energy and passion in, the thing you were actively working on, it wasn't the thing that you were spending all of your time doing. And we couldn't afford to do that as a family. And I think that's, even with when my coaching was just starting, people would ask me about coaching all the time. And I'd be like, I don't have time to do that full time. That's cool. And I don't have enough demand to do that full time, but I keep a healthy dose of it going on. I think it's so easy. The coffee roasting business, people all the time, people ask, my brother, all of his friends from school think that that's all I do full time. It's like I own this coffee empire that's growing. Yeah. And I was like, until recently, it wasn't even a legal entity. Like I was bootlegging coffee. And so, but the perception versus reality is just so hard to, I think that then you're balancing that with, I think what you're talking about, Allie, is my customers don't give a crap about me saying like, I only do this part-time. I'm only doing this a little bit. Like, no one cares how I'm roasting the coffee. They just want dope coffee. And so they don't need to hear me apologize for it. And
perception is reality.
Yeah.
It's Phil Knight going, oh yeah, we got distribution. Yeah. And the Nike guy, and he didn't. Yeah. And he went and figured it out. It's, this is the thing that's so huge. When people are secure in who they are and they know, like, this is who I am and I don't have to hide or prove anything, then I can downplay and accentuate things as I need to. And so early on, there are plenty of things that I could be asked to do today that I've maybe never done in specificity, but generally I've pretty much seen a lot, over my own leadership experience, but specifically the last 2 years, and navigating lots of crazy scenarios and buyouts and outsourcing and dealing with big build-ups for big projects and whatever, all these things. Early on, it's like, well, what do you do when you normally walk through a situation like this? I'm like, well, here's what I do. Yeah. And I had never maybe done some of those before, but I wasn't dangerous because I knew what I was good at. I knew I was in my lane, and I knew I could help. Yeah. It's having the ability to accentuate part of those stories, and then maybe pull some down, but have the solid approach that you're not going to be dangerous to people and take them somewhere you're not able to really be in their lane. And what's crazy to me is about for the people that you were talking about coming to your coaching that see the other business owners, and most of the people that share the most about their business online typically have the worst businesses.
For sure.
They make the least money and they're struggling the most.
It made me think of Brene Brown talking about sharing online and how, I forget the exact quote, but it's essentially sharing what you've learned versus like sometimes in the moment of the mess. And I feel like I apply that to my own personal accounts, but also our business, where just because like behind the scenes shot is a one thing, but I like to talk about things I've learned as I've processed it. Once I've processed it, not while I'm processing it. And I think a lot of that is, you have experienced, Chris, in your business, you're presented a problem you've never solved before, but you have the processes and the wisdom to take on anything. I always say that for design. We get clients sometimes who ask, well, are you specifically a packaging designer? And I'll say, no, we're a little too small to have specific, types of designers. But I think if you're a good designer, you can kind of approach hopefully any problem. No matter if it's printed or online. I think the same could be true of a coach or a consultant, or even a service. When you're such a small business, you rarely are in situations where you can't try something or you can't tackle a problem.
I think it is, even as we think through branding, it's important to understand when we're paying attention to other businesses or competitors or other people online, it's that their stuff is for their customers, not for other businesses. It's not to tell a story to other businesses about, like, let me tell you everything that's true about owning this business. It's about getting the customers to engage with. And so I think
that's huge.
It's so easy for us, well, in the agency world or the creative world, it's easy to look at every other designer, every other photographer and hyper focus on whatever they seem to have going on. And then in reality is always different than perception. And it's not for us. They're not doing it for other agencies. They shouldn't be if they are.
Totally. Yeah. Well, some of the things that helped me grow the most, the fastest, because it did come out of the gate that first year, was not knowing. Because I was coming at it from such a different place, not knowing competition and what they do, and not really caring. Patrick Lencioni has written some leadership fables, but he's talked about this idea. It influenced me. This was like a decade ago. But if it's coming from a place within you, it's like, screw the competition. This is what I want to do. And this is like in the medical field, specialization tends to be dangerous, because if you specialize on one thing, then you see everything connected to that. And so they have an issue right now with general practitioners. There's not as much money in that as there is specialization. So in areas like Columbus and big cities, you get tons of specialists, not enough general practitioners, and then they're not able with a wider array of tool belts. So you think about the packaging design person, they're coming to you, and you're going to bring fresh thinking to that, right? And you're going to be honest about what isn't working, right? And that's the thing about, like, and I, taking this back to the big idea of the podcast, the full-time piece of that. It's being in it full-time that you actually can feel really fast, depending on how big the business is. As it gets bigger, it's harder to feel it, but what's working and what isn't. I've had, maybe 3 ideas a year that are the impact makers and the money makers, but I have 10 things that die. And they die fast, and I let them die fast. Because I'm connected to the market and feeling what's working. Right. And it's like when you're sitting with these people and helping them expand their vision of how packaging design could look like, it's like they're coming to you for a reason. And sometimes it's us having the courage to know they knew who the top industry players are for packaging design. They'd have gone there if they wanted that. For sure. They wanted something different. Right.
Last question, or the last kind of topic. We don't have to be done soon, but in that first year, as you're getting started, first 2 years, what are the most helpful things that you invested in, brought in, bought, hacks, tips, tricks, all of that stuff? I'm just kidding. Things you stole?
Yeah. So I would say that, like, the first few months, a mistake that I made after, like, changing markets was not going to the Village well. It's kind of an old way to talk about it, but and James Altucher, I've heard him talk about this. You gotta find those places that you want to be a part of. And so for me, it was, I came to events here. I was like, oh, I see an ecosystem developing at the Wonder Jam. I'm just going to be at a bunch of events and maybe do some. I went to a coffee shop where a lot of business happened. I don't know if we're doing shout outs or not, but
Oh, definitely. I love
Yeah.
shout
You can do
outs.
whatever you want.
I mean, I love Ardor Coffee.
This
so I'm
is like
loyal.
this is a really. The next episode will have a lot more shout outs than this one. This is a big problem. We'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
We need
the
a
end,
lot
we
more
just-
shout outs.
But so that's hilarious. So I was One Line Coffee, and I just started doing meetings there, and I just thought about it this way: like, I need to be seen working. So if I've got to give away at good prices, I think I did a couple of free, but not much. But just give it away at a good price. That would be an easy low entry barrier. Get my schedule full,
Yeah.
and then nudge for referrals over time. And so that was smart. I wish I'd have done that sooner.
Got it.
Smart was doing the podcast. I started that pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I wish I would have started that sooner.
Yeah.
I look at like 5 or 7 things that made the biggest difference, and all of them, the only regret I have is I wish I would have done them sooner.
Why do you think you didn't? Was it not having the idea, or was it balancing too many things, or was it?
I think for me, it's this idea of, I know how to carve out an institutional income. And I've been my own boss almost my whole working life, except for a few years. But in that arena, it was carving out an institutional income.
Yeah.
Professor work, whatever.
Yeah.
Actually having the demand of, you got to go make this happen on me. It just took me a while to get my feet underneath me.
Right.
And this sounds weird, but what I had done up to that point wasn't as hard as the reality of, this has to go appear out of nothing. And I had done some hard things, right? But I grew up around the stuff that I'd been doing. So it wasn't hard for me. This was new and different. And so I think it was just getting my feet underneath me, because if I would have done the podcast sooner, I would have gone out and booked sooner, I would have raised my prices sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I say that, and when people go through coaching, like one person service-based business is like 80% of my coaching, so photographers and coaches and whatever. And it is a lot of, it's like that supply and demand thing. And so you can either, it's just limit supply of available times to meet with you, and then that becomes in higher demand. So as soon as you can fill up your calendar in a smart way, then you'll start to charge more for the spare moments that are sitting around, which is exactly what you experienced. Is as soon as I got full and people perceived that I was full, they saw me sitting at a coffee shop talking to people, they're like, oh, I should be sitting at the coffee shop talking to Chris. How much does that cost? Like, what is that for? And if you and I were smart, we would have started that in 2008, not in more recently. Yeah, right.
Yeah, 14.
We would start doing that, and then we could be retired. I think the other thing that's interesting about your story is that you do have, like, a family to take care of. Like, it's not. There's some people who start a business with a bucket load of cash and don't have that need, and so you can end up fiddling around with stuff. You have a little bit of a luxury that can. Some people use it to their advantage, but other people they do better without it probably. And so you had that thing of every day waking up like, I have to do things today that pay bills, which means I have to do things today that make a big impact for somebody to the point that they'll pay me for it. And so you started to find those things faster than I think probably a lot of people would have if you had some other form of income that you didn't have to think about. Or a lot of people who start doing a coaching business. I mean, a coaching business is like the easiest thing to do and not make money at, and just talk to like 3 people a week and give it away for free and call yourself a coach and act like a coach online. It's very different to make a living from that world.
Oh yeah. Well, and like, I've had people tell me, I mean, the second year you break 6 figures and you're sitting across from somebody, and they're like, you should do free chats. Like, have on your website, schedule a free chat with me. Why don't you have business cards? Why aren't you on LinkedIn? I'm like, I'm intentionally not doing those things. I remember when I found the URL I give out, like, if people ask, and it's got to be invitation. And, it was like, this is how I want to play. And so, you rewind 10 years ago and you unleash me to go do this 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the fortitude in the midst of the pressure to play that long game and not do LinkedIn and not do business cards. And people listening to this, tactics that may work for them, LinkedIn and business cards, go do them. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
For me, it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was able to be, again, 51% long game, 49% short game. I'm not going to compromise these. I don't want to be gross, but I'll go out, I'll deliver as much value as I can, and I'll nudge. Like, hey, how impactful was this for you? Who do you know that needs this? And that kind of thing. And I think for me, it's just looking at that and going, you know, that fortitude is going to be tested. You have to be willing, and this is the hardest part for me. Everybody has a hardest part. My hardest part is you have to be willing to release that control and know that, I mean, there were nights I've gone to bed and my account goes negative.
Yeah.
I close a giant thing in the next 48 to 72 hours and I don't know when.
Yeah.
I think it'll close then. And then you're like, oh, they're out of town for the next week.
Oh,
and
I've
I'm
been
like,
there. You get there out of office and you're like, this is killing me.
Oh, man.
One time we went, there was like a year at the beginning where we went negative in our bank account, and I had a $6,000 check that got delayed in that there was a holiday on a Monday. So that means it was like, you know, even later in depositing, right? And I remember us like counting down to 3 a.m. when it would clear, like, because it, you know, clears at 3 a.m. the day of.
Oh yeah, we woke up at 3 a.m. and I went to an ATM because we had to pay someone, and I dropped off cash in their mailbox
At like 3:30 in the morning.
because I was like, this is my fault, not your. Like, we should.
We try not to make, like, at the beginning,
I drove to
vowed,
Clintonville at like 4
we
in the morning.
vowed to never punish the people we have to pay just because someone else is like late or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those are the things that no one, like you mentioned, you don't talk about it a lot.
We didn't put that on the blog.
Yeah, when you first start, you're not talking about those hardships. That's the perception that, yes, it's true, but it doesn't need to be a part of your brand.
I'm so glad you
great to
said that.
talk about it now.
yeah, exactly. Like, I can remember a 4th of July where I put a big check in the wrong account. So it was like July 3rd, right?
Yeah.
And I get this flag, and they're like, we're sending this check back to you.
Which takes like,
And I'm like, when does it come back to me now? And they're like, it'll be back to your house because of the holiday in 4 days. You know? And I'm like,
can I come to the bank right now?
I did. I was like, can you see it in there? Like, I could dig through the ATM
did you tear it up?
And that, I would see people. I knew where I was in that moment, and I would see other businesses sharing too much about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I would be like,
You gotta stop.
You gotta be smooth with that. You gotta be in a place that you know that you're not making peace with your pain by bearing it.
And
all.
you can't you can't burden other people with your either mismanagement of clients or timing or you know,
up and down
business. And I think, you know, you talked about your first few months. The December before we started the Wonder Jam, I remember I made $10,000 on my own. I was full time, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then we started the Wonder Jam, and we dealt with like family stuff, travel, learning how to work together as like husband and wife. And that June, we brought $4,000 in, which isn't nothing, but it's not enough.
By me joining the team, we lost $6,000 a month of revenue.
In just the adjustment period. I mean, you're thinking of like, how do I shift people from, like, similarly, Chris, going from nonprofit to for-profit, and for us it was Allie Lehman as a freelance designer to what does the Wonder Jam mean? And so
me going to meetings and people saying, where's Allie? Like, I didn't sign up to work with you. And I was like, well, I'm free up Allie's time to do more stuff. And they're like, no. So then I became just, what was I doing? Right.
We like had traveled that year to Hawaii, New York.
That was the other thing we did, was as soon as we worked full time for ourselves, we traveled everywhere and just like just stayed perpetually broke from like, oh, let's go to New York. And then we like spent all of our money.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, cool. We just went back.
And I think those stories are a little funny, like, hey, don't go traveling a lot the first month of self-employment. But I very much advise other people to not stress others out while they grow, you know? And I think that keeps going back to like, just because you're processing something really dark doesn't mean everyone on the internet needs to know about it. Or
it's probably not the best. It's probably not even the best for you
to
process it there.
Yeah.
That's not the spot that's helpful for. It doesn't serve your client. Like, it doesn't, in no way does it serve your clients.
Right.
even our stories of like, oh, we had to get a check and then come in and we went 3 a.m., go to an ATM and take it drop. Like, we hurt nobody with that story. We hurt ourselves, and no one's excited. That doesn't make working with us fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't make working with us useful. It doesn't help us deliver anything better to anybody.
And now that we're at a place, all of us, I think, where you've moved out of those growing pains, you never forget. I actually was talking to, shout out, Jeremy Slagle today on the phone, who is a really great designer, and we joked about how we're now at our career where we realize just because you have a really great quarter, don't go out and buy that awesome espresso maker you just think you deserve. You know, like, well, Adam's looking at me like, actually, we should.
That's the next thing that's just happening.
But he talked about, like, you know, he's like, I'm going to save it. You know, like, I'm not going to just celebrate and ruin my life next quarter, you know.
Totally. Make it stressed because of that.
Yeah. And it's fun to talk to people who have been doing this for a decade or more, and be like, oh, we learned the same lessons. It's like, but we didn't have to talk about it constantly together while it was happening.
Totally.
So, yeah.
I think we could say to everybody listening, if you are working with a small business and they send you an invoice, pay it ASAP. Don't hold back.
Yeah.
Don't go to the bathroom.
Don't work with them if you can't pay it within the next 2 days.
Don't even finish listening to this podcast. Like, hit pause.
Go pay.
And go pay. Because, I mean, like, you know, I just was so identifying with what you were saying about the big quarter thing. Because I feel like one of the things that I've done well because of previous business experience was keep the overhead low.
Yeah.
Like, I knew early on, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And that has been huge. But we did have a giant quarter, and we had unexpectedly had to move, and that's a whole other story. And this was like the first quarter of business.
Yeah.
And we had to go, we went and got some furniture at IKEA.
Yeah.
And it feels amazing, and we come home, and our basement was flooded. And so now I got to put together all this furniture and clean it.
Right.
And I was like, I shouldn't have spent money.
Right. You're staring at it still packaged. You're like, should I return this?
Oh.
You're like sending your family like books on minimalism.
Yeah.
Like, we're not gonna have furniture anymore.
We're gonna lay on the floor.
Now, I will say this, though, and this is something that for people listening that's huge, because I work with the wealthier clients that I have, totally get this, and honestly, they don't share a lot online.
Yeah.
You know, it's people that are trying to break through from the hustle of the hour to hour to actually like bigger checks. One of the things I invested in early on, and I see a lot of people troubled with doing this well, and that is pay for things that are cheaper than what you can do them for based on what you make per hour. That sounds basic, but it's amazing to me how many people don't do that. Like, there's so many online options. There's so many, you know, I use a few different services. One of them prorates it by the hour, and I can delegate anything to it. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. But yes, keep overhead low, but multiply yourself.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm going to clone myself. I'm working on that right now. So
Yeah, because we trust nobody, but we need to delegate.
She won't have as like great a personality as I will, but you know.
And she'll be like shorter.
Yeah,
right? She'll
that's
be like
fine.
1 inch shorter.
She'll be
and
2
like
inches tall.
A little more boring.
I'm going to do one and make it bald. My hair is thick and luxurious and beautiful.
Oh, that's great.
So just to try to balance it out.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Make it harder on myself.
Yeah. Maybe I should also invent something that makes me taller. And through that, my clone is just like a miniature statue. The scientists out there,
Let's,
I hate
Let's go further down this. What else would happen?
I don't know. She'll have 4 arms.
What if I get confused and make out with the clone?
Well, she'll have 4 arms, so hopefully.
I wouldn't know. Like a quick glance. You have no idea.
She hides 2 of them, yeah.
I've always been attracted to people with 4 arms. So you didn't know that, but...
That's awesome.
That's the outtake for the opening.
Yeah.
If people wanted to follow along in your world, where do they learn about you, know about you?
Right now, the best place to go would be SightShift.com, SIGHT shift.com. And you know, for me, it's one of those things that it's crazy how much there's the podcast there, there's a blog there. When I look back at the last couple of years, there's a ton of resources they could dive into and get them help fast wherever they are.
You've written a bunch of books. If there was one that a stranger was going to read first, what would you tell them to read?
Probably based on today's conversation, figurethatshift.out.com.
Cool.
Figure That Shift Out. But
they can look
ask
on
me
Amazon
that.
too.
Yeah, they can look on Amazon. Ask me that in a couple months, and it'll be thestuckbook.com.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah.
We'll do a follow-up.
There you go.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Thank
you.
you. Privileged to be here. Fan of what you guys are doing, and I mean that because I've said it out loud. But people that are listening, it's a privilege to be associated with you guys.
What if I get confused and make out with the clone?
Well, she'll have 4 arms, so hopefully.
I wouldn't know. Like a quick glance. You have no idea.
She hides 2 of them, yeah.
I've always been attracted to people with 4 arms.